Welcome back to the channel, a place where the greatest stories in entertainment come alive. If you love legendary performers, unforgettable moments on stage, and the kind of stories that prove why some artists become icons, then you're in the right place. Today's story is about one of the most fascinating nights in show business history. A night when everything seemed stacked against one man. A night when a crowd came ready to mock him. And a night when silence fell across the room because of the power of a single voice. Today we're talking about the moment Dean Martin walked onto a stage filled with hostility and left it with thunderous respect. Now imagine this scene for a moment. It's late evening in the golden era of entertainment. The lights of Las Vegas are glowing like 1,000 stars. The casinos are buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the steady hum of slot machines. Inside one of the most famous venues in the city, the crowd is already seated, but something feels different tonight. This audience didn't come to celebrate the performer. They came with doubts, some even came with a little bit of attitude. Why? Because the man about to walk onto that stage had a reputation that many people misunderstood. By this point in his career, Dean Martin had become famous for his relaxed charm, his easygoing smile, and that famously casual style. People saw him with a drink in his hand, joking with friends, leaning into the microphone like he didn't care about anything in the world. But here's the thing most critics never understood. Behind that relaxed image was a voice that could command a room like few others. But on this particular night, not everyone in the audience believed that. The room was packed with gamblers, tourists, and regulars who had seen just about every act Las Vegas could offer. Some had come because they loved Dean Martin, others had come out of curiosity, and a few had come with something closer to skepticism. You see, by this time, Dean Martin was already deeply connected to the legendary circle of entertainers known as the Rat Pack. That group included giants of entertainment like Frank Sinatra and other larger-than-life personalities who ruled the Vegas stage. Being part of that world meant expectations were sky-high, but it also meant critics were watching closely. As the orchestra tuned their instruments that night, you could feel the tension in the room. Waiters moved between tables carrying cocktails. Cigarette smoke drifted slowly through the air. Conversations buzzed quietly, but every now and then you could hear someone say something like, "Let's see if he's actually good tonight." Then the lights dimmed. The orchestra began playing a soft introduction. And suddenly the room grew quieter. A spotlight appeared on the stage entrance. Then slowly, walking with that unmistakable relaxed confidence, Dean Martin stepped onto the stage. Some applause broke out immediately, but it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't the roaring welcome of a guaranteed triumph. It was more like a cautious greeting. Dean looked around the room with that familiar half-smile. If you've ever seen recordings of him, you know the look. Calm, unbothered, almost amused. He walked to the microphone slowly, adjusted it slightly, and leaned forward as if he were about to tell a secret. Before singing a single note, he spoke. "Good evening, folks," he said casually. The audience responded politely, but the energy was still uncertain. Now here's the moment that makes this story fascinating. Instead of rushing into a big dramatic song to impress the crowd, Dean Martin did something completely unexpected. He paused, he looked around the room again, and then he delivered a simple joke. The crowd chuckled, then he told another. More laughter followed. Within minutes, something remarkable started happening. The tension began melting away. Dean Martin had a natural ability to make audiences feel comfortable. His humor wasn't loud or forced, it was relaxed, conversational, like he was talking to friends in a living room rather than performing for hundreds of strangers. And just like that, the atmosphere began to change. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The orchestra started playing the introduction to one of his classic songs. Dean stepped closer to the microphone, and he began to sing. Now imagine hearing that voice live in a room like that. Smooth, warm, effortless. It wasn't just technically good, it felt personal, like he was singing directly to every person in the room. As the first verse ended, something incredible happened. The room went completely silent, not the awkward silence of boredom. The kind of silence that only happens when an audience is completely captivated. Every note floated through the air like velvet. The critics who had come to doubt him leaned forward in their seats. The gamblers stopped talking, even the waiters paused for a moment. Dean Martin continued singing with that calm confidence that made it look effortless. But anyone who truly understands music knows that kind of control takes enormous talent. Song after song followed. Each one seemed to deepen the connection with the audience. Some songs made the crowd laugh, others made them sway gently with the melody. A few even brought couples closer together at their tables, and slowly the same audience that had once been skeptical began transforming into something else entirely: fans. By the time he reached the middle of the show, the applause between songs was no longer polite. It was explosive. The same people who had doubted him earlier were now cheering louder than anyone else, and Dean Martin, staying true to his personality, never once acted like he was trying to prove something. He simply smiled, delivered another smooth joke, and launched into the next song. At one point during the performance, he glanced toward the orchestra and said with a grin, "You know, I was a little nervous coming out tonight." The audience laughed. Then he added, "But now I see you're all drinking enough to think I'm good." The entire room erupted in laughter. Moments like that made the show unforgettable. Because Dean Martin didn't just sing well, he created an atmosphere. By the end of the night, the transformation was complete. The same crowd that had greeted him with cautious applause was now standing on their feet, clapping and cheering for an encore. And when Dean Martin returned to the stage for that final song, the energy in the room was completely different. He wasn't facing a hostile crowd anymore. He was standing in front of an audience that had been won over entirely. That night became one of those stories people told again and again in the entertainment world. Not because it was dramatic or controversial, but because it proved something important. True talent doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it simply walks onto a stage, sings a song, and lets the music do the talking. Dean Martin understood that better than almost anyone. And that's why moments like this helped turn him into a legend. Now I want to ask you something. If you were sitting in that audience that night in Las Vegas, what do you think you would have felt when the room suddenly went silent during his first song? Would you have been one of the doubters who changed their mind? Or would you have recognized his talent from the very beginning? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about legendary performers, unforgettable concerts, and the moments that shaped entertainment history, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Because the next one might just be even more incredible. As the applause finally settled that night, Dean Martin stood quietly at the microphone, looking out at the crowd that only an hour earlier had seemed doubtful and distant. Now the same room felt completely different. The atmosphere had changed from skepticism to admiration, and everyone in the venue could feel it. Dean adjusted the microphone slightly and gave one of his relaxed smiles, the kind that made audiences feel like they were sharing a private joke with him. "You know," he said casually, "when I walked out here tonight, some of you looked at me like I owed you money." The room exploded with laughter. Even the toughest critics in the audience couldn't help but smile. But what made the moment truly powerful wasn't just the humor. It was the quiet confidence behind it. Dean Martin never tried to force respect from the crowd. He simply entertained them, song by song, joke by joke, until the entire room realized they were witnessing something special. The orchestra began to play again, and Dean delivered one final song, softer and more emotional than the others. The audience leaned in as his voice filled the room with warmth. Couples held hands, glasses stopped clinking, and for a few minutes the noisy world outside the theater seemed to disappear. When the final note faded, the silence lasted only a second before the entire audience rose to its feet. The applause was thunderous. What had started as a challenging night had turned into a triumph. And that's the moment everyone remembered. The night a doubtful crowd was completely won over by pure talent and charm.